To be out of strength, powerless is a feeling. To become completely powerless. To have no thing you can do for remedy. So Paul gives 5 powerful feelings here. We probably could drum up some more that are very, what we would call negative feelings or detrimental feelings. So Paul's feelings are deeply involved in this verse. He wants the people he's writing to know the level of feelings that his missionary team experienced serving the Lord. Now listen carefully. I hear people say that if you're a strong believer, you won't have these kind of feelings. Here is the apostle himself saying, I had those feelings. I had them. And so these are powerful statements. So if somebody makes you feel bad because you have strong feelings, don't follow that. Feelings are real. They're powerful. They come upon us sometimes uncaused by us, unplanned by us, unanticipated. Boom, they're on us. Here's Paul saying, affliction, overwhelmed, out of strength, despaired, sentence of death felt upon them. That's a really strong feelings. So Paul had those. And remember, I said that our faith, feelings, and focus tend to run as a unit. So how did Paul keep his feelings from winning in this moment? And I believe it was his focus. Now there's one word repeated 3 times in verse 10 that I want you to find. It's repeated 3 times in verse 10. See if you can find it real quick. What is it? That's it. It's the word deliver. That was his focus. And I'm going to show you how it was his focus. Paul is going to say the way that we navigated our feelings was where we put our focus. We didn't put our focus on the feelings. They were real. They were severe. They were bad enough to despair and think we're done. We're all dying right now. It's over. But his focus is in verse 10. It's on deliver. But I want you to see how it's on deliver and how this ties to the Exodus. Verse 10. He has delivered us from such a terrible death. Now, it's easy to think that that was simply Paul talking about his situation, but it wasn't. Paul's talking about the big death. Paul's saying the thing that we're rooted in. Go back to the end of verse 9. God who raises the dead. Paul then talks about the terrible death. Paul's focus is rooted in the work of Jesus Christ that saved him from the big death. From death itself. From the thing called death. The enemy called death. The entity called death. He saved us from that death through Jesus Christ by the resurrection of Jesus from the dead and by our promised resurrection. In other words, part of Paul's focus is a past event that has happened in the life of every believer wherein they understand that they have been delivered from eternal death. They're saved. They're rescued. Just in the same way that the Israelites in the Exodus should have looked back at the Passover and crossover. That should have been their focus. So that when lack of food and lack of water came, they understood it was never God's intent for them to perish. He's just delivered them from so great a death. The death of the Passover and the death of the crossover. He's delivered us. And so what Paul's doing is he's saying, do you know how we got through that? We kept focusing on this thing. He has delivered us from so great a death. So great a death. He's talking about hell. And he's able to focus his missionary team on that. And he's saying, you know how we got through and why we're writing this letter is because we have been delivered from so great a death. Now what that did is that worked faith into his feelings by the choice of focus. Let's ride through that again. It worked faith into his feelings by the choice of focus. He took his missionary team and himself and he said, okay, guys, where are we going to put our eyes right now? Are we going to put it on the affliction? Are we going to put it on the lack of strength? Are we going to put it on the sentence of death? Are we going to put it on the despair? Where's the focus? No, we're going to focus on his deliverance. He has already saved us from so great a death. And by focusing on that, he began to, when you're prepping meat for the grill, if you're going to do a rub, you got to work the rub in. You just got to work the rub into that meat and let it marinate, let it soak. That's what we need to do with our hearts if we want to overcome our feelings. We've got to marinate and rub into our hearts the grace of the gospel. That God has already delivered us from so great a death. He's delivered us from hell. He's delivered us from the bondage of Satan. He's delivered us from the domain of evil. He's delivered us from all that. Work that in like a rub on that steak that you're going to grill, like the marinating of the chicken you're going to grill. Work that in and let it soak. And what it did was it provoked faith toward the future by working focus into the present. Notice, he has delivered us from such a terrible death, and he will deliver us. Do you see? He got to the he will deliver us, and we've put our hope in him that he will deliver us again. He's gotten that from one thing, that he has already delivered us from so great a death. So what was the Israelites' need in the Exodus? To know that he would deliver them from hunger and thirst would first be to know he had delivered them through the Passover, the slavery, the Egyptians, the Red Sea. He'd already done that. He's already done that. So how do we work our grumbling? We work our grumbling by calling the feelings what they are and being honest, just like Paul says. I'm afflicted. I am despairing. I am overwhelmed. I am beyond my strength. I feel like death is hanging over me. I just say, these are my feelings. These are real. They're what they are. And then I begin to massage into those feelings this one great gospel truth, that at the cross, where I first saw the light and the burden of my heart rolled away. It was there by faith I received my sight, and now I'm happy all the day. I begin to work into those feelings gospel truth. And it will provoke my faith. So Paul didn't say, you know what, we quit feeling bad. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, well, we chose to focus on this and all of our feelings went away. He doesn't say that. He never says that the feelings themselves were ever vanquished as an event. He simply says they no longer drove the bus. They weren't running the show. They weren't setting the stage. They weren't bringing us somewhere we didn't want to go. We reined those feelings in. They didn't go away. They persisted. They were strong, but they weren't in control. Faith was able to guide us. So he says, He has delivered us from such a terrible death, that hellish death of hell itself, and He will deliver us ultimately. And we've put our hope in Him. And this is that beautiful thing that works into despair and into strengthlessness and into affliction, is this thing called hope. Faith gives birth to hope, and hope is the opposite of grumbling. It's totally different. Hope is not deliverance in itself. It is confidence that deliverance will eventually come. That's why in Romans 8, he puts it so plainly. And I'm going to close with this idea. Come with me with Romans 8. He says here, and he's talking about this, the feelings. He says in Romans 8, verse 22, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. Not only that, but we ourselves, who have the Spirit as the firstfruits, we also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Now in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is not hope, because who hopes for what he sees? Now if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with patience." What's Paul saying? He's saying hope is that which leads us to trust God's outcome is best, regardless of present circumstances. I believe this was what Paul was referring to in Philippians 4 when he said, "I've learned the secret of being content in whatever circumstance I'm in." And that's when he says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." What is Christ's gift to us in these things? It is the deliverance from so great a death and the promise of a final deliverance from the presence of sin. So how do I combat grumbling? I admit my feelings and I confess them. I admit feelings of powerlessness. I admit feelings of despair. I admit feelings of sentence of death. I admit feelings of affliction. I confess this is how I feel. And then I take the gospel, and like a steak I'm preparing for the grill, I begin to rub into my heart the gospel truths so that it begins to flavor my heart. He has delivered us from so great a death. That's what he did at the cross. He was bearing the wrath, and he has delivered us. It's done. Work that in. And notice, as a result of that, faith will begin to set hope up for us. And hope displaces grumbling. Nope will never displace it. We can run around and say nope to grumbling all day, and we will not respond to that. We'll just suppress it. Hope suppresses not just the grumbling activity, but it relieves the cause for grumbling itself. It's a change, a supernatural change. So I want to encourage you, when you get grumbly, dig down under and confess what you're actually grumbling about. Say it. If you're afraid, say you're afraid. If you're ashamed, say you're ashamed. If you're stupid, say you're stupid. Whatever it is. If you're hurt, say you're hurt. Just say, Lord, this is it. This is why I'm grumbling. I'm grumbling because I'm afraid. Do you know that's when I typically grumble? I try to hide my fear with toughness. I try to really hard. And my toughness, because I'm really not tough, always comes out sounding like a grumbly old man. But if I can just say, you know what, I'm scared. Or I can say, I'm hurt. Or I'm stupid and don't want to admit it. I'm embarrassed. So many things I could confess. And then begin to massage into those feelings the great gospel and his great deliverance. And let hope displace grumbling. It's a powerful tool. So I'm going to shut down for this evening, and then we'll do a Q&A before we close. Father, thank you for our folks who are joining us online. Thank you for our folks who are here. Lord, would you do this in me? Because I'm guilty of grumbling. And would you do this in us as a flock? Because we're guilty of grumbling. In Jesus' name, amen. Let me shut this off.